This video explores 10 foods we used to eat in the 70s that don't exist anymore. If this brings back memories, please let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more nostalgic journeys through British history. Hash 10 foods we used to eat in the 70s that don't exist anymore Part 1. If you grew up in Britain during the 70s, your taste buds knew a completely different world. The supermarket shelves looked nothing like today's glossy aisles. Walking into a corner shop or your local Tesco back then meant encountering brands and products that have since vanished into memory. Some disappeared quietly, whilst others left us wondering why we ever thought they were a good idea in the first place. The 1970s was a peculiar decade for British food. We were caught between post-war rationing mentality and the dawn of convenience culture. Families were experimenting with exotic flavors whilst clinging to traditional tastes. The result was a fascinating mix of products that seemed perfectly normal at the time, but now feel like artifacts from another planet. Let's start with something that sounds almost mythical today: Spangles. These little squares of hard-boiled sweetness were absolutely everywhere from 1950 right through to 1984. You could buy a packet for just 4 pence in the early 70s. They came in flavors like Old English, which tasted suspiciously like mothballs and nostalgia mixed together. The barley sugar variety was particularly popular with your gran. Each sweet was individually wrapped in wax paper, making them last forever in your pocket. Mars actually tried bringing Spangles back in the 90s, but they only lasted about a year. Sometimes the past should stay in the past, even if we miss it terribly. Then there was Texan Bar, the chocolate that took an entire geography lesson to finish. Remember the adverts? A man's gotta chew what a man's gotta chew. It cost 6p when it launched in 1975, and your jaw certainly got your money's worth. This nougat and toffee combination could survive a nuclear blast. Many a filling was sacrificed to the mighty Texan. The bar disappeared in 1984, though it made a brief comeback in 2005 before vanishing again. Perhaps modern dentists simply couldn't cope with the carnage. Speaking of things that stuck to your teeth, let's talk about Fry's 5 Centers. This chocolate bar wasn't content with one flavor. It gave you 5 different fruit fondant centers all in one bar. You get orange, raspberry, lime, strawberry, and pineapple flavors. Each section was clearly marked so you could decide which bit to eat first. It felt terribly sophisticated for a chocolate bar that cost less than 10p. Cadbury discontinued it in 1992, breaking the hearts of anyone who enjoyed their chocolate with a side of decision-making. The genius was in the variety. You never got bored halfway through like you do with other bars. Now, if your mum was feeling particularly adventurous in the frozen food aisle, she might have picked up Vesta ready meals. These weren't like today's microwave dinners. Vesta came in boxes with multiple packets inside, each requiring different preparation. The beef curry was legendary, though it tasted nothing like actual curry. You had to boil rice, heat sauce, and crispy noodles in the oven separately. The whole process took about 40 minutes. By modern standards, that's hardly convenient. But in the 70s, having Chinese or Indian food at home felt incredibly exotic. The crispy noodles always burned slightly, but we pretended not to notice. Vesta limped into the 2000s before finally admitting defeat. We'd all moved on to proper takeaways and actual convenience food. Arctic Roll deserves its own moment of silence. This log of sponge cake wrapped around vanilla ice cream, then covered in more sponge, became a dinner party staple. You'd find it in every freezer from Land's End to John O'Groats. Bird's Eye launched it in the 60s, but it really owned the 70s. Slicing it without the whole thing falling apart required surgical precision. The sponge would be rock hard from the freezer whilst the ice cream melted everywhere. Yet we served it with pride, usually with a tin of carnation evaporated milk poured over the top. Now that's sophistication. Technically, Arctic Roll still exists in some supermarkets, but it's a shadow of its former self. The modern version tastes like disappointment wrapped in nostalgia. Let's not forget Angel Delight, though this one actually survived. What changed was how we felt about it. In the 70s, this instant dessert powder was proper pudding. Your mum would whisk it with cold milk and somehow create magic. The butterscotch flavor was controversial. You either loved it or thought it tasted like liquidized cardboard sweetened with broken dreams. The strawberry version turned an alarming shade of pink that doesn't occur in nature. The chocolate variety was basically brown foam. None of this mattered because it was quick, cheap, and children actually ate it. A packet cost about 12p and would serve 4 people, assuming you didn't eat it all straight from the bowl. Angel Delight still exists today, but nobody over 30 will admit to buying it. We've developed standards, apparently. Back then, serving it in fancy glasses made you practically Fanny Craddock. The 70s kitchen was full of shortcuts and surprises. Every cupboard held something that promised convenience or excitement. We'll discover more of these lost treasures in Part 2, including some truly baffling choices that seemed perfectly reasonable at the time. #10 foods we used to eat in the 70s that don't exist anymore. Part 2. Whilst Angel Delight was performing chemistry experiments in your bowl, another phenomenon was happening in the biscuit aisle. Cadbury's chocolate biscuits, which later became Cadbury Fingers, had a predecessor that few remember. But before we get there, let's talk about something even stranger: banjo bars. Mars launched the banjo in 1976, and it was genuinely peculiar. Imagine a Milky Way wrapped in biscuit, then covered in chocolate. The advertising campaign featured a cartoon cowboy playing a banjo, because apparently that made perfect sense at the time. It cost around 7p, and tasted like someone couldn't decide between having a biscuit or chocolate, so they just combined both. The banjo vanished around 1984, though you'll find people today who swear it was the finest thing Mars ever created. The texture was certainly unique. That crispy biscuit coating gave way to soft nougat inside. Your teeth went through multiple emotional experiences with each bite. Moving into the realm of proper meals, we need to discuss Smash instant mashed potato. Technically, Smash survived well beyond the 70s, but its cultural moment belonged entirely to that decade. Those adverts with the laughing Martians became more famous than the product itself. For mash gets smash entered the British vocabulary permanently. The powder came in a cardboard box covered in space-age graphics. You'd add boiling water and stir vigorously, creating something that approximated mashed potato if you'd never actually eaten real potato. It tasted metallic and somehow both gluey and dusty simultaneously. But it was instant, and in the 70s, instant meant modern. A packet cost about 15p and claimed to serve 4 people. That was optimistic, unless everyone only wanted 3 spoonfuls. Your mum probably kept some in the cupboard for emergencies, though what constituted a mashed potato emergency remains unclear. Real potatoes only take 20 minutes to boil and mash, but Smash promised to save you precious time. The Martians stopped laughing eventually, and so did we. By the 90s, Smash had become a punchline rather than dinner. It still exists in some shops, lurking like a beige ghost of convenience past. Now let's venture into truly bizarre territory with cremola foam. This Scottish delicacy was essentially fizzy powder that you mixed with water to create an alarming drink. It came in flavors including raspberry, lemon, and orange. The powder was bright, almost radioactive in color, and fizzed enthusiastically when water touched it. You'd buy it in distinctive cylindrical tins covered in psychedelic designs. Each tin cost around 25p and lasted ages, because a little went dangerously far. The resulting drink was aggressively sweet and fizzed so much it made your nose itch. Children absolutely loved it, which tells you everything about children's taste. Cremola foam disappeared from production in the late 90s, causing genuine mourning in Scotland, where it held special cultural significance. People hoarded tins like they contained liquid gold. Some tins apparently sold for silly money on eBay years after production stopped. The company tried relaunching it in 2015, but as with many revivals, it wasn't quite the same. Either the recipe changed or our taste buds finally grew up. Probably both. Speaking of drinks, who remembers Rise and Shine instant orange juice? Before fresh orange juice became standard, we drank this bright orange powder mixed with water. It came in glass jars with metal lids, and tasted like oranges had been explained to someone who'd never actually seen one. The powder clumped together if any moisture got in, forming solid orange rocks at the bottom of the jar. You'd have to chip away at it with a spoon like an archaeological dig. Each spoonful into your glass created an orange cloud that took ages to dissolve properly. Stirring was mandatory and vigorous. A jar cost roughly 30p in the mid-70s and lasted weeks because you only used a teaspoon per glass. It bore absolutely no resemblance to actual orange juice, but we didn't know any better. This was decades before fresh juice became affordable and commonplace. Rise and Shine felt healthy, even if nutritionists would have disagreed. The brand eventually faded as fresh and concentrated juices took over. Nobody missed it except perhaps dentists who'd appreciated the steady business from all that sugar. Let's return to chocolate territory with Toffo and treats. Toffo was basically a toffee penny from Macintosh, wrapped in distinctive red and gold paper. They were individually wrapped, rock hard, and lasted forever. Your granddad always seemed to have a pocket full of them. A small packet cost about 5p. Treats, meanwhile, were Galaxy's answer to M and MS before M and MS properly invaded Britain. The advertising slogan was "Melts in your mouth, not in your hand," which Mars later borrowed for their own products. Treats came in chocolate, peanut, and even toffee varieties. The toffee ones were particularly dangerous to dental work. Both disappeared during the chocolate bar consolidation of the 80s and 90s. Big companies decided we didn't need quite so many varieties of essentially the same thing. They were probably right, but we still feel the loss. Finally, let's mention Ready Breck, which technically still exists but has been completely transformed. In the 70s, this porridge oat cereal promised to give you a warm glow. The adverts literally showed children with red glowing outlines after eating it. Every winter morning, millions of British children consumed their radioactive-looking breakfast before school. It cost about 18p for a packet that lasted a week. You'd add hot milk and sugar, creating something that stuck to everything it touched. The bowl required soaking for approximately 3 hours afterward. Ready Breck represented the British approach to breakfast: warm, filling, and slightly depressing. But it genuinely did keep you warm during those freezing mornings when your school had no proper heating. Perhaps there was something to that glow after all. These foods weren't just products. They were markers of a particular moment in British history. They remind us of simpler times when we trusted food manufacturers implicitly and thought instant meant better. Some deserve their nostalgia. Others make us grateful for progress.